Hello, Impact Makers. I'm Virginia Cincromani, a sustainability trainer, coach, and author. Welcome to The Good Communicator. You're probably wondering, what's The Good Communicator? It's your go-to podcast built exactly for you, the sustainability professional, to help you turn sustainability from a hurdle to triumph. Here, we break down the art of effective communication to make sustainability irresistible and co-create new futures. Come on a journey with me as we dig into proven frameworks and actionable strategies and demystify the process of influencing others in every episode. From building trust and using empathy in communication to overcoming resistance and inspiring action, we craft, we inspire, we co-create the perfect message that doesn't just remain in the head, but moves hearts towards sustainable change. Hello, Swati. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Virginia. How are you?
I'm good today. So I'm really delighted to have you on the show. So I just would like for you to explain to our listeners, who are you? What do you do? So tell me about you.
Sure. So I'll probably start with a bit of a background. So I've got a background in architecture, project management, and a specialization in sustainability. In past, I've worked as a client, consultant, contractor, sort of helping them develop and implement sustainability strategies for both buildings and infrastructure projects. Last year, with the curiosity of exploring and implementing sustainability in real estate, I joined CBRE. Mm-hmm. And at present, I'm embedded into a global financial service account as their global energy and sustainability manager. And I'm helping shape their decarbonization strategy, managing their environmental and energy management systems, so ISO, whilst working on other regulatory reporting and verification activities such as greenhouse gas accounting.
Brilliant. I know also you worked on high-profile projects like HS2 in the past.
Yes, yeah. I've been with them as a client for over 6 years and then delivering one of the contracts for just over a year. So I would say 7.5 years of my career is been with HS2.
So the reason why I wanted to interview you is because you are a typical, in a way, technical person who probably through all these projects has to use a lot of communication. and so I wanted your experience in terms especially of challenges. So what sort of challenges have you encountered in your career so far? What would you say is the biggest challenge?
I think for me, it sort of started understanding the cultural nuances or communication style prevalent to the UK. Because I came here in 2008 to undertake masters in, sustainable design from Cardiff University. And I got my first job as a sustainability intern in London just right after completing the degree. And I found myself in a unique position that, fresh out of university, understanding how to navigate life, work in a foreign land was genuinely overwhelming, and it took me some years to be confident in my own skin, if I may say. Yeah. And communication style in UK is very different from Asia, is more indirect. One needs to pay attention to the words, tone, body language to actually gauge the true sense of feedback or a conversation. And I've taken public speaking classes, other English classes to feel more comfortable at speaking. I time to time read different books on improving communication, just because I find that as a challenging subject in itself. And recently, I'm reading this book called The Cultural Map by Meyer, which I'm actually halfway through, and is an excellent read if you're a foreigner working in another country and interacting with cross-cultural teams, because the book decodes culture, complexities, and have like strategies to avoid clashes and so on and so forth. And what I want to probably bring here is that all these years, I thought maybe it's just me that I'm unable to understand what the British says and what they mean. And in the book, I was able to say, wow, somebody has validated that thought. There's actually a table which lists out some frequent used phrases and what they really mean by, what the British says and what the Dutch or other cultural, similar frequency sort of understands. So as an example, if the British says, the phrase, please think about this a little more, what they really mean is, from the book at least, it says, your idea is bad, think again, or don't do this. However, a Dutch would interpret, or I would have no clue. I will say, okay, it's a good idea. Keep developing it, just the other way. So I think these were the things I've sort of seen over the years, which I feel, these are like cultural nuances or, communication styles very different. And how do you adapt? I guess it will take me a lifetime to master this art. But it's still very much in progress. Small things like, great job is an overused phrase, which is equal to, fine work. But somebody new might perceive as, oh, excellent, and I've gone beyond expected. So I would say that has been and still is one of the challenges being in a foreign land, I would say.
I can echo what you're saying word by word, because also coming from Italy, well, now over 20 years ago, sometimes even after 20 years, I don't understand exactly all the nuances or maybe all the way of saying. And I agree, in the sense that also when I come from Italy, we have that more direct approach. We actually say often what we think, which can come across as very rude in here. So I had to tone down on my directness over the years, although some of it is still there, obviously. And I agree, it is a massive challenge. And I'm sure some of the listeners will be probably not British or, that's not their first language, English. But it's actually the Britishness of it all that also took me, really by surprise when I came over. And it is a work in progress. So I completely agree in that sense. It's just, I think it's also any country, really. If you move country, if you go somewhere else, you will find different cultures and different ways of communicating, which is beyond the words themselves. Is the nuances, like you said, and what's not been said almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So also going on the path of similarities to me, you are an architect, an environmentalist, and all of this, the path that we had to start, well, at least I had in this country, is very similar. And in terms of communication and working, you said you worked for 7 years for HS2. It's a massive project which had a lot of scrutiny over the years, the press and everything. And in fact, for those who don't know what HS2 is, can you please spend 2 words saying what that was, and also what it was like to work in such a big project, again coming from maybe another context, another country.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know what HS2 is the new high-speed 2 link that will connect London to Birmingham. It was to be connect Leeds and Manchester, but the lines have been phased out. So it's the only phase 1 is sort of on track and is sort of under construction. And our HS1 is the Eurotunnel link. So this will be the second one. And yes, I worked at HS2 as a client and is one of my career's highlights so far, I would say. The role sort of started with just setting up a target, for stations and depots. And I felt, because I came to HS2 as a consultant, you're always given what the client has already decided and you're just sort of just delivering to it. And I thought I actually have an opportunity here to actually set a target, which I think a few of us do get it. So it was sort of, a dream come true that you are setting a target. So I have to get leadership buy-in from different governance board. So that's been very different. I have never seen, taken actually like a paper, it's called like a board paper, and you present that to different stakeholder across the organization who would quiz you and say, why do we need this, so and so forth, and you put your arguments, and then you get that approved. So that was something new that I did whilst in HS2, and not once, but several over the course of my, tenure at HS2 for different reasons. So once the target was set, then you try and understand and outline, what requirements would you want your contractors to achieve and how they would deliver that. How would they report back to the client? All of those I did whilst on HS2. And this was going in tandem with working alongside BRE to develop their brand new scheme called BREEAM Infrastructure, which again took a few iterations. BREEAM Infrastructure, sequel, BREEAM Infrastructure, back again. I have been with them along all these years because it really impacted HS2 as a project. So once the scheme was launched for BREEAM Infrastructure, I would say I followed the same thing. You set a target, you then followed the similar process in terms of what that would mean for the contractor. And when I say infrastructure actually covered enabling works, means civils works and rail systems. So essentially the whole project was wrapped around into certification, whether that was stations or the building sites or the infrastructure, which was then assessed under BREEAM Infrastructure. And again, like at every process, I've worked with various internal teams, the external consultants who are working for HS2, other stakeholders. It could be from communication to how the assurance would take place, all of those things. So took those standards through different committees, but honestly, it was very rewarding because I felt I was able to turn now a target into a contractual requirement, which the supply chain will deliver, and for the biggest infrastructure project. So it's not like a school or a collection of, apartments or whatever. The scale was really, really big. And I think the other thing that I was able to do, which again, never had that opportunity. And I thought, okay, this is it. That's what I want to do. I pushed the best practice to another level, that obviously all the scheme, they have to be excellent. But on top of that, I introduced a concept called HS2 is a minimum performance requirement, which essentially said that, okay, whatever the BREEAM manual is saying as a mandatory you have to do for your excellent rating, the project selected, I would say, another 20% of credits, which complemented the project's sustainable goals. So for example, there was a big push, and there's still a very big push for circular economy. Circular economy doesn't come into an excellent rating. It's nice to have. It's not a minimum. But with this mechanism, we said, oh, you have to achieve circular economy credits. Because if you don't, then how can we demonstrate our guidelines on circular economy on the project will actually run? So it was like a hook. Sustainability got truly baked into, and weaved across several topics. And then, BREEAM sort of provided that governance, a mechanism, how it will be demonstrated. So we worked sort of very closely with other, topic specialists, and we were sort of cheering for each other's topic to say, yes, we really want this in the project. I can actually go on and on, but I would say, able to set, implement, deliver all the BREEAM certification has to offer. I did it and went beyond. I even wrote as a legacy a technical paper on, sustainability assessments at HS2, which was published by ICE. And it's part of HS2 Learning Legacy. So anybody who would like to learn more can, read that paper. And my excitement still didn't go away. I moved on to May's construction company to deliver HS2 Euston Station as their sustainability lead. But because of the government pausing works at HS2 Euston Station, I had to move on.
Look, I mean, what you managed to achieve is pretty incredible, knowing how difficult sometimes it is to push sustainability, even in the smaller projects. Having done that in such a massive project is, a massive legacy you left, there. Just for the listeners' benefit, I would say BREEAM, or BREEAM, as many call it as well, is the BRE environmental assessment method for buildings. Is a standard for certification that leads to certification that has been used for over 30 years now in the UK, but it's also quite well known in the built environment industry in many, many countries. And it's really the most structured and I would say the most robust system that is out there at the moment to demonstrate the sustainability in buildings. So I just wanted to add that, just to fill in the gaps in case somebody is not from the construction industry. In all of this, I wanted to pick on something you said at the beginning. You managed to present a paper to the boards of these big companies, various stakeholders, and managed to push your targets and the implementation of the targets through. Did you have a system or some ways of doing this in a way that ensured that you were actually listened to and that people bought into your ideas? So what's your, communication hacks there?
So again, I think in any big project, especially run by funded by government or perhaps, anybody who's funding it. So the senior or SLT would want to know, why you're doing something, and what do we get out of this? And is it really, really, necessary? So I think as a tip in sustainability or, presenting business cases, I would focus and still sort of recommend people understanding why is something that you're doing it and how that work or a deliverable or a report or this board paper fits or aligns with, client or HS2's, goal, for example, and how those goals were then tied to national and global commitments. So you create a bit of a golden thread from what that you're trying to deliver to connecting to the very top. Because if that is clear to senior management, it's very easy to sell your idea. So, for example, again, back at the HS2, when I had to get buy-in, I would explain, why we're doing BREEAM. They could have said, we could make our own scheme and check. And I said, you can't really mark your own homework. We're going to be using taxpayers' money for this. We needed a third party checking and validating something, That's the reason why BREEAM is very prevalent in the UK. You won't use any other scheme, Green Star or LEED, because the project is of national importance. And then you sort of explain by doing BREEAM, the project or the DFT and the government would benefit and how that aligns with the wider government's, goals and objectives around environment. So, you can connect those dots and tell how BREEAM is sort of helping, because BREEAM, again, as you said, is an assessment methodology which not only just focus on environment, but actually a lot of different subjects, and is more like holistic approach. So you would bring those things to the paper first. And then once you've set the scene, everybody is on the same page, you then focus on how that will be delivered, because that's an easy thing you've already worked out. But the difficult part is that you tell somebody how that aligns and how you create that golden thread.
So it's almost like you are presenting what you want to push as a necessary, like a really fundamental part of their bigger goals and bigger plans to achieve sustainability in different ways. Maybe not even just sustainability, but other targets they might have.
Absolutely. And I think I do that in my current role as well. Like if I have to get a client approval, for a small carbon project, for example, an office needs to now change their lighting, fluorescent lighting into LED, you would still present, the cost saving, snapshot or a presentation, but you would also try and connect and align how that project will help meet clients values or ESG commitments. Again, that golden thread on why this project is important and will help that client meet their company's goals, so they can look really nice and shine in their whatever reports or however they want to demonstrate that yes, they're truly committing to sustainability. So you try and put that thread for them.
So this is something that I focus on a lot when I wrote this book, The Good Communicator, which hopefully will come out in January. And one of the things that is really a golden rule almost, I realize, of communicating sustainability is that you don't start from the ethical part of it. You actually meet the client or whoever you're speaking to where they're at. So if they want to deliver on their values and their missions, then you appeal to that. If they have a money target, you appeal to that, and so on and so forth. And I like the idea that you're sharing about having a golden thread. So really connecting the dots between your idea and what the client or whoever you got in front of you already has. So you see that this is part of already an ecosystem of targets and things that they have anyway to deliver. Is not something that you are adding on top of their workload, because this is something that people hate. Sustainability is seen like an extra layer of red tape, as it's called, bureaucracy, money. No, actually sustainability is, or whatever project you're pushing, is part of it, is actually helping you deliver what you're already committed to, right?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. I love that. So while I was preparing for this podcast, I was stalking your LinkedIn profile, of course. And so I noticed that you've selected some top skills on LinkedIn, and you selected 3, which really caught my attention. And they were the flexible approach, cultural sensitivity, and communication. So what do you mean? How do you use these skills that you think you have, which you obviously do, because otherwise you wouldn't be here? And how do you use them in the workplace on top of what you already shared with us?
Yes, very interesting. I didn't even know I selected. So good. Actually, after reflecting, I would like to add a few, which I'll tell you later. So I sort of reflected, and I felt good. It's already selected, because with my current role at CBRE, it has helped me grow from thinking locally, as in just UK focused, to globally. And thus, all these skills are necessary, and I use sort of, daily in my workplace. So for example, understanding the basics from like time zone, what would be the common time where all of us could connect. I do that every day because I have team in like Poland, Boston, and I'm sitting in London. 3 different zones. Need to understand that, okay, afternoon needs to be where work gets done. Other things are flexible. I can do my things in the morning, while afternoons is for meetings and getting things done, or to show that, things are working, giving presentation to clients, so on and so forth. I think another similar thing is being just cognizant of public holidays. Each region has a different, how do you navigate your planning or milestones? So I've created like a calendar in Smartsheet here that obviously lists all the deliverables, and milestones that we're working, but it has an ability to add public holidays, because sometimes, like again, when I was just working for UK projects, I knew everybody has the same time, same holidays, all of those were very in sync. But now it's not, and I have to ensure who's going to do what, and that person is sitting where. So how do I connect with them? It's a little bit of a a mapping exercise that goes, but again shows that, you are being culturally sensitive, you have a flexible approach, you're able to communicate those things all across your team and help prioritize. Another thing to illustrate cultural sensitivity would be, so when I communicate with local site teams in Europe, let's say Germany, I'm very cognizant that, their response is going to be very direct communication style, which is going to be very different when I'm interacting with colleagues in the UK or US. Again, the book that I mentioned, I would highly recommend, listeners who are, not from the UK to read Cultural Map, is sort of to decode those cultural sensitivities, which I have to sometimes, deal with. And I feel like I'm being shy. What do I do in those situations? Again, another thing that I believe helps me is frequent check-ins. In a way, as a communication style, especially when I'm project managing. And I think in sustainability, a lot of professionals, they project manage sustainability. So if you have like different deliverables and, a variety of stakeholders are interested who would like to know, how things are progressing, then is to have those frequent check-ins. So I'll give you an example. While managing ESOS, which is Energy Saving Opportunity Scheme, and EED, which is Energy Efficient Directive submission. So they both are regulatory submissions and are required by the government for offices or businesses which are a certain sort of threshold. So multiple office submissions need to be completed. So I had to liaise with obviously a consultant who were doing that exercise, but then they had a sub I would say auditor who would do audits. And then it's like a spider diagram. So I am liaising with somebody who then liaises with somebody else. I have to then report up to my global clients and their local asset managers as well. So when there is so many stakeholders who are interested to know whatever bits are going, and this has to be done in a timely manner, otherwise it's going to be heavy penalties, you have to devise a way. So like I said, frequent check-ins, it started with monthly to going to bi-weekly to having a weekly. And once a submission is done, things are done, because that's how you would communicate with your counterpart to say how things are progressing. And then with that information, you could report back to the client saying, okay, this is how we're progressing, and we still, aim to meet the deadline, and so on and so forth. So I feel like, I'm actually a born planner and organizer. I'm not sure how that got missed from LinkedIn. I will be adding those soon, Virginia.
I think it's actually, they sound like small things to somebody that doesn't know how important these things are. But even having the sensitivity to understand whether some colleagues are celebrating, a national holiday, and you demand something of them immediately, it can put them off. It can actually create a barrier between you and that person, because obviously you are taking the time to plan out carefully so that you avoid these sort of issues, and that you work all at a time that is convenient for everybody, which shows that you really care. I think psychologically, it really is important to understand. It's not just about, again, the message. It's actually how you deliver it, when you deliver it. So there's so many, nuances in communication, including when, where, all of this. That is exactly what you were talking about, I believe. So still on the line of tailoring your message and making sure that you consider the when, the how, etc. I believe one of the things that I teach people is to focus on the audience you got in front of you. And that includes, obviously, besides the how and the when, but also who you got in front of you. One of the methods I use is this DISC personality assessment, DISC standing for dominant, influential, steady, and cautious. Which personality do you think you have, and how does that influence the way you communicate?
Okay, I will answer that, but could you gauge what that could be, given you teach, so I can then just check whether you got it right or not?
Okay, obviously you are a woman of detail, so I would say there is quite a lot of detail oriented. So it's between probably steady and cautious. But you also, I feel like you're a person, keen on people as well. So probably steady. Am I right?
Yeah, so I think I identify, if I just think about me as a personality, I would say I'm a strong DC style.
Okay.
Um, but because I have worked on big projects and now
Mm,
dealing with large teams, I believe I have now blended S trait in my personality. And I
right.
feel again, sustainability is a collective endeavor. So I have to be very mindful. It's not that I can just go solve the world problem. No, it's all of us. So hence I feel like I've now blended S. But on a personal front, I feel I'm very independent, resolute, would love to be in control, result driven, high standards. But to manage team and wider audience, we all need to be very collaborative. And I
Mm,
think that's now comes very naturally to me, depending on, again, I adapt my communication style and align my personality based on the work. Again, as an example, when I do audits across different sites, I have devised a plan on how it will work, how it will end. So very much, DC style personality. I'll have a kickoff meeting, explain everybody what needs to be done by when, what are the check-in points, so and so forth. So I help it run internally smoothly and be prepared for an external one because I feel like I'm in control. I can do all of that. But when the work needs to go through, a governance or input is needed from different stakeholders, then I become a C type. Again,
mm,
giving example from HS2, because it was such a big project, you can imagine the stakeholder engagement. I set up working groups to complete the standards that were put together for BREEAM and SQL. And when it came to the delivery, I established, a client contractor BREEAM working group, which to date is still running and happening, as it's a very collective forum to share, how the progress is, like a contractor's progress for each, whatever certification type they're doing, how that's going on, what learnings they want to share with each of the contractors, disseminating information, clarifying questions or concerns. So that's still a very like a collaborative group, which is still running. And I'm very proud of that. So I think those way I can define. And recently I feel like the I side is sort of still a little bit I need to work on, but I feel again with a mix of INC, I've actually co-founded ALIS on LinkedIn with a few friends of mine, again to influence and connect with other Asian ladies working in sustainability. That's what it stands for, ALIS. And is actually to find like-minded ladies and create a community to inspire each other and share knowledge with each one's I would say adventures and endeavors. Perhaps this podcast will help to reach out more ladies in sustainability.
I hope so very much. But interestingly, you see, for me, when I was listening to you, I could perceive the details. So that's why, for me, looking at the disc sort of scheme, I could see the detail element. But then, because of what you were saying before, then I thought, okay, she's probably more on the steady, cautious, steady side. Interestingly, it is possible to change your natural style. It is possible to adapt, at the very least, in line with whoever you got in front of you. And in fact, another question I had is whether you do any sort of stakeholder analysis before you start talking to people, or whether you try and adapt your maybe if you have like a presentation, do you think about your audience before you go and do that?
Oh, absolutely. I think I don't do stakeholder mapping that much, but I think I should be doing that more consciously, I would say. But in terms of judging the audience or presenting, I would say yes, that's a must. I always think, who am I presenting to? What are they interested? Are they really interested in knowing the details, or they would like to know it like light touch, high level, what that it means to me? What do they take away? So definitely tailoring my presentation based on the audience, making sure, if there are too technical things, then explaining that, breaking down with an example that are easily relatable, having more visuals. Again, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I don't like to write long reports. I might have a nice way of a tabulated, way to explain what I really mean. So I think I do take all of those things into account.
And I think is great because you do it naturally. Obviously, you don't do it necessarily, sitting down and said, okay, look, I got X amount of people interested in details and X amount. But that's a sign of a good communicator. Somebody that's actually asked themselves that question. What would my audience be interested in? Do I actually need to go into the details? So maybe not. Maybe if you are speaking to a C-suite type of audience, so all the directors and the high level managers, they're not interested so much in the details. They want to see the vision. They want to see where we're getting at with this project. So obviously your experience has forced you to look at that side of things, which I think is very it's great because it shows growth and it shows a growth mindset, which is something that I always encourage my listeners or people that read my books to really embrace. Even if you were born a certain type of person, that doesn't mean that you can't adapt and change and make your communication style better. It's just you have to ask yourself more questions. So that's my feeling anyway.
That's great.
Okay, so as we are drawing to a close in our little chat, I am wondering whether you have 3 tips that you can share with the listeners that might take away about sustainability communication.
I think I've covered some of them already, so might not dwell into those again, but just as a recap, like we touched on just now, knowing your audience and tailoring the message. The next big one was, again, focusing on why, the golden thread. Again, it's very, very important to know that. It just helps you sell whatever you are from a sustainability point, deliver that message very, very easily. I think the third one I would want to talk about is creating a management plan as a single source of truth. So whether it's a BREEAM management plan, a carbon management plan, and recently I'm working on a greenhouse gas inventory management plan. So essentially anything in sustainability. And then defining and detailing roles and responsibility on who's doing what and how that, stakeholder piece that you were just talking about, maybe including that. Because it's good to know who's responsible, who's accountable, who will be consulted, and who will be informed is very essential in sustainability, because somebody could be your, cheering group as well, right? And that will help understand, oh, this is actually an audience, it's very tricky to navigate. So doing that is very essential. So documenting in a plan is key. Other things to document would be, assumptions on whatever you're doing. Again, BREEAM, LEED, carbon, greenhouse gas, whatever. What are the boundaries? Because that's how you're making things very black and white, and there's no ambiguity here. With all of that, everybody will be generating data. How the data will be managed, reported. You could have subtopics or whatever, but broadly including data management. And what standards is your work going to be assessed against? What that is. If that's BREEAM, again, in carbon, you have past 2080, or in greenhouse gas, you have the greenhouse gas protocol guide, whatever, what that is. How will you be assessed? Will there be any audits? Will there be any verification, any appendices? All of that is to be planned and concise in one document called like a management plan. Trust me, that will not only help through, your day-to-day assurance and verification, but would be useful for somebody. If somebody leaves, that knowledge is not lost. And if somebody comes on new, will appreciate it so much that is a knowledge bank of whatever you're doing or delivering. So I would highly focus on creating that, because it's again a way of communication, but you're just documenting that. And again, it could not be with flowery words, I would say. Make it basic, simple, concise, but have everything in one place. I feel that would be my biggest tip for a communication.
And I absolutely love that. I think I've come across so many teams that don't work that way. And so many projects where, like you said, somebody leaves and nobody knows where to pick up again that project. And you mentioned, for example, identifying who's responsible for what. And that's something that I remember we used to teach people that were at BRE, because I worked at BRE for a long time. We used to teach in the BREAM training, the Rashi matrix, which is exactly what you were talking about. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to support. We also have the S. Who needs to be consulted and who needs to be informed. And that's not, I mean, it sounds trivial, but it's not, because sometimes there is so much overlap that you miss opportunities, there are mistakes are made, things, there are delays. So it's not just about the organization. It's also about communicating clearly who needs to do what, by when. And that is a communication issue. Is a massive one. And so it's not just for people that are well organized like yourself, that look at the details. It's actually for everybody in the team to make sure that a project goes from A to Z in the best possible way, you reach your targets, etc. So it's not literally just a piece of paper or, a document that stays somewhere and gathers like dust. It's a living document that is so fundamental.
I couldn't agree more. And the one thing I would like to add is to judge when you need a management plan. So I think when it's going to be more than 5 people, you need it. Yeah. 5 people is fine. You can communicate, connect. As it goes beyond that, and again, in construction project, design project, real estate, whatever you take in sustainability in a built environment, there are multiple stakeholders. And it's not that one iteration, it might go from just design to completely new team. Then it might go to completely new team, So, and if somebody from a client is looking at that, I would say, what do you call the gates of designing and construction, that information is lost if you're not capturing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say even in teams of 3, these things can happen though. Because I remember one of the first jobs I had, it wasn't in sustainability, it was in architecture. Somehow it was 2 people working, 3 directors in the company. So, but 2 people actually doing the job operational. And I was assigned, say, to draw the ground floor of a building, and my colleague was doing the first floor, which to me is complete madness because things obviously would not line up in vertical. And already communication was lost, even in such a small team. So I think in principle, understanding who's responsible for what and, what are we doing? All the basic questions, what, when, who, how, all of this and why, of course. All of this needs to be clear, whether you write it down because it's, it's a bigger team or whether you are actually discussing it, but then take some sort of maybe record of that. I think that's so important for communication to go in the right way.
It is. Yes. I now would probably like to change. So not even 5, I think for whatever. Because it is like when we say something, how would you ask somebody, are you going to be true to what you've said unless you've written something down, like an email or something? So I truly believe in creating management plans. It doesn't have to be really lengthy, but covers all of those that I've just talked about and will help the team immensely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Swati, for your contribution and to this lovely chat. I hope, you go from strength to strength, and good luck with the Indian Ladies in Sustainability project. It sounds fascinating. And all the best, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I truly enjoyed it, and all the best for your podcast.